today we're going to do something that people find difficult. It's not that hard if you think about what I tell you. So it's called changing the subject of a formula, and it is really, really important if you want to do any of the sciences, particularly physics. They will ask you in Year 11 to be changing the subject of a formula quite a lot, so you've got to be good at that. The other thing that is used for is even if you leave school at the end of Year 10 and do a trade, if you decide you're going to be an electrician, I can tell you from a past student who spoke to me, he said, I wish I had have listened a little bit more in changing the subject of a formula because I needed it during my trade. All right, so when he was doing his TAFE course, he needed to do it for the electrical course. All right, so let's have a look. The subject, if you know the way a sentence is constructed in English, we have a subject. Well, this is what I was taught when I was younger. I don't know if you still do it, but we had a subject and a predicate. The subject is the thing at the beginning of the sentence. All right, so if it was the cat chased the mouse, the cat is the subject. The rest of the sentence is the predicate. Okay, so the subject was the thing at the beginning of the sentence. So it's a little bit like that in maths. So the subject is the letter that's on its own on one side of the equation. All right, all other letters, you're going to pretend that they're numbers. The way you treat them like you would if you were solving an equation and they were numbers. All right, so in this first question, we've asked to be changing the subject of the formula to x. Okay, so if we change the subject of the formula to x here, it means that x is our letter. All right, so you've got to treat just the subject letter as the letter. So x is our letter. Every other letter there is going to be treated as you would a number. So we want to get the x by itself over here on the right. So we're going to get rid of this. So just pretend it's a number. We're taking it to the other side and we're doing the opposite. So copy the d down over here a bit further, move that over, and it's minus c. So now we've got the x by itself. That's the end of the question. You do need to rearrange this though, so that the left and the right hand sides will swap, because I do need the x on the left hand side for this work. Okay, so there's the answer to the question. X equals d minus c. X is the subject. All right, let's look at the next one. So remember, we're making x the subject, so x is our only letter. You're going to pretend that y, m and p are numbers. We're solving an equation for x. So the first thing we're getting rid of is this here. So we're going to take it to the other side, do the opposite, and subtract it. So we have y minus p, and over here we've still got x over m. Now the next step to get the x by itself is to get rid of the divided by m. So we're going to do the opposite of divided by m, which is times by m. Now you have to be very careful with this. All right, so you could come over here and times both terms separately by m, or you can put that in a bracket, right? Because there's more than one term, you can put it in a bracket. And then when you come over here and multiply by it, we can write that at the front like this. Okay, so we've taken all of that side and multiplied by m. I'll just put the times in so you can see that we did times by it. You don't need to expand those brackets. You can leave it like it is. If you wanted to expand it and write my minus mp over there, that would still be correct. But they're both about the same, so do whatever works for you. I'm swapping sides now, and that's the answer to my question. All right, let's look at the next one. Remember, we're making x the subject. We want x to be by itself. First thing I'm going to get rid of is the divided by 2 down here. So I'm coming to the other side and I'm timesing by 2. I'm hoping it's okay if I can just write this now. You should all be smart enough for me to do that. You can see I'm timesing by 2 there if I write 2a. That will leave me with just x plus y. Now I'm still trying to get the x by itself, so I've got to get rid of the plus y. Come over to the other side and do the opposite, which is minus y. Now I'm just going to swap the two sides over, so I've got my x on the left-hand side. And that's the answer to my question. All right, the next question is asking for you to make y the subject. So y will be our letter. Everything else, all the other letters we're treating as numbers. So y is our letter this time. So we're going to get rid of everything over here so that y is by itself. First thing that I'm going to move is this. There's a plus in front of it. I'm moving it to the other side and doing the opposite, which is minus an. So there's my m. Move that over and it's minus an. We still have ay on the right. Now to get the y on its own, I need to get rid of this a. So I'm going to come over to the left-hand side and I want to divide by a. Now, like I said with the multiplying over here, I can divide each individual term by a, or I can put the whole thing together. Those two terms we can put in brackets, and I can divide the whole thing by a. So if I do that, it will look like that. You don't need the brackets on the top of the fraction because it is assumed that if you've got a top or a bottom of a fraction that it is in brackets. If you really need to, then put them in. That will leave me with just the y over here. So now I need the y as the subject. I've got to write it first. So let's swap sides. And that's the answer to the question. I don't want to see anybody doing anything silly like cancelling those a's. Remember, you cannot cancel anything in a fraction unless you have one term on the top and one term on the bottom. And up here, we've got two terms, so there's no cancelling. All right, looking at B. All right, so in B, remember, we're trying to make y the subject, so we're going to get the y by itself. So we're getting rid of this p here first. That's a plus p. So let's move it over and subtract the p to do the opposite. And we're left with square root y on the right-hand side. Now to get the y by itself, I need to get rid of my square root sign. And the opposite of square root is squaring. Okay, now it's really important with this, you cannot square individual terms. All right, we can multiply individual terms, we can divide individual terms. You cannot square individual terms. Okay, so it is really important with this one that you treat the whole thing in brackets and write your squared outside it. Okay? It's q squared minus p squared would be wrong. Okay? So just think of it this way. We learn this formula. We don't learn this formula. Okay? Because that does not equal that. They're not equivalent things. Alright, so now that the y is by itself, I'm going to swap the entire sides. And there's my answer. So I might just write a little note here about the powers. So if you do powers or roots, it must be done to the entire side, not individual terms. Not individual terms. I'll write whole sides. Okay, I'm squeezing this in, but really important that you write that down the right-hand side so you can see what was happening there. All right, so let's have a look at C. We're trying to get y on its own. Now this one's a bit trickier, right? This is getting a little bit harder now. So the quickest way to do this, there are many ways of doing it, but the quickest way is to go, well, y, the thing I want, is sitting on the bottom of a fraction. Now, let's get rid of that bit there. If you have a letter on the bottom, we've done this before when we've been doing things in trigonometry. When you have a letter on the bottom, you do the swap. I've taught you this before, right? So it means this thing here, the letter that I'm really wanting, is sitting on the bottom of a fraction. I'm going to swap that with this. I just swap spots. It's the quickest way to get it done. So that means I have square root y sitting over there now, r on the top, and the m is coming down here. So they've just swapped positions to look like that now. All right, now I'm trying to get the y by itself. So I want to get rid of my square root sign. So the opposite of square rooting is squaring. So we're coming over here to the right-hand side and we're going to square it. So I can take the whole thing and put squared outside it like that, and that question is finished because the y is already on the left-hand side. Now on that one, you could also have written y equals r squared over m squared if you want, because you can square the top and the bottom of the fraction. Alright, let's look at the next one. This time, the subject will be whatever they've asked you to use. Alright, so we're changing it a little bit here. So let's have a look at this question. We have v equals lbh, and they want h to be the subject. That's what they're trying to tell you. So we're going to get the h by itself. Now I can get this done pretty quickly. I can get that h straight away on its own if I just put these together and go, right, I'm getting rid of all of that in one go. The times lb, that's what h is attached to. I can get rid of all of that, take it to the other side and do the opposite, which is divide. So let's do our division by lb. Okay, so now we've got our h by itself. We just got to write it on the left-hand side, so swap sides, and we have h equals v over lb. All right, looking at the next one, we've seen this before. This is a formula that changes temperatures from degrees Celsius to degrees Fahrenheit and vice versa. They want you to make C the subject. So C will be our letter, and it's going to be on its own in the end. So the first thing I'm getting rid of is the plus 32. So let's come over here and minus the 32. I'm left over here with 9c over 5. Now the next thing I'm getting rid of is the divided by 5. So I'm going to come over here and multiply by 5. Now remember, the easiest way is put all this in a bracket and do your multiplying by 5 to the whole thing. Like that. Okay. Next step, we're getting rid of our 9. So we're going to come over to the other side and take the whole thing and divide by 9. Sorry for squeezing this in, but we needed to write this important note down. And that's it. Now we've just got to get the C to be the subject, so I'm swapping it around. And there's the answer to the question. Okay, so let's have a look at a couple more questions. This one here is asking for x to be the subject. So we want to get x by itself. So the first thing I'm getting rid of is the times m there. So let's go to the other side and divide by m. And then I'm not going to write the brackets around n plus x because there's nothing outside it now because that's gone. So there's no need for those brackets. I'm just going to leave it as it is. Now I've still got to get the x by itself. So I need to get rid of my plus n here. So let's come to the other side and subtract the n. We end up with that. The x is now by itself. Swap them over so it's written first. Now, just a note on that answer, I don't know, sometimes with the textbook answers, you look at it and you go, I thought I did it right, and you're looking at their answer going, well, that's not what I got. So sometimes it could be that you're both right. So for instance, with this question here, if I look on the right-hand side here, sometimes the textbook might do something like this. I'll just write it down, I'll rub it off in a minute. If you want to write it down, you can. But what they sometimes do, just write that over there so you can see it. What they sometimes do is go, all right, we're going to get these two terms here on the right-hand side into 1. So they go, all right, there's a denominator here of 1. We're going to get a common denominator for m and 1, which would be m, and write that on the bottom. You go, okay, I didn't change that denominator for that, so I'm not changing the top, that's going to stay p. But I have changed it here. I've times by m to get that denominator. So I need to do the same on the top. Okay, so if I do that on the top, I'm going to end up with minus nm, and the textbook might give that answer, or it might have the n and the m swapped around the other way and write mn. Okay, so sometimes there's a few different alternatives for answers. So if you're not sure when you're looking at your work and you get to the end and go, I don't know if this is right or not, and I don't know how they got that answer, if you just email me, I'll have a look at it and tell you whether yours is acceptable as an answer or not. Okay, so if you want to write that down as something the textbook might continue with, then you can. All right, the next question over here is about body mass index, which I know you'll probably do that in PDHPE. It's a formula that, well, it tells you here the body mass index of an adult is given by the formula B equals m over h squared, where m is the adult's mass in kilograms and h is their height in metres. You must make sure you use the units they've told you, otherwise you're going to get the wrong answer. Now in part 1 it says change the subject of the formula to h. So I've written the formula down. We're now going to get h to be on its own. So remember what I said before, the quickest way, if that h is on the bottom of the fraction, we do the swap. Okay, so it's going to swap with this. So they just swap positions, so that means we're going to end up with h squared sitting there and b sitting down there. Now we're going to get the h by itself. That means we have to get rid of our squared here. So when we come to the other side, we're going to do square root of that whole fraction. And have I got any other ones where it ended up with the square root? I'm just checking. No other question ended up with the square root in it. Okay, because I need to talk about this. When you square root over here, remember when we've done quadratics before, that's an indication you're going to get two solutions. One positive and one negative. So I do need to write a plus or minus in here. However, you've got to think a little bit with this one because the h is talking about a person's height. Can a person's height be negative? No, it can't be. So you don't need the negative answer in this one. So it depends on what the question's talking about. So I'm going to just alter that answer now to just being that. And if I don't have any sign outside that, it means that it's positive. Okay, and we all know that a height has to be positive. Okay, so let's look at part 2. Now the Roman numerals in maths means that this is going to lead on to this. They've actually exaggerated that by saying hence, because hence means use part 1's answer. Use the part before's answer. Okay, so use part 1's answer and do what they've asked you to do. So if we use part 1's answer, I'm going to write that formula down. H equals root m over b. Now I'm going to use it. So they've told me the body mass index is 25 and the mass is 60 kilograms. It is the right units for the mass, so I'm just going to sub in. Okay, the body mass index was the m in the formula. Was it or not? No, I've got it the wrong way, haven't I? Okay, so the m is the mass. So that's the 60, and it was in the right units of kilograms. The body mass index is given by the letter B. I don't know why I've changed that to a little b. It should be a capital B. Make sure you've got a capital. Okay, capital B is 25. And now, we're just going to the calculator now, and we're going to be rounding off to 2 decimal places afterwards. So let's just see what the calculator says here. All right, so we're typing in the calculator, square root, fraction key. Right, square root, fraction key. 60 on the top, down arrow, 25 on the bottom. Oops, and then press equals. Gives you that decimal, let's write it down. Okay, and we're going to 2 decimal places like they've asked. So our third digit there is a 9. That means we're going to go up by 1, and we end up with the answer 1.55, and the height is measured in metres. Okay, so a person with a height of 1.55 metres and a mass of 60 kilograms has a body mass index of 25. Okay, so we've got a few more harder questions to do on this. I've kept the real hard ones for the next video, so let's have a look at those in the next one.